Welcome to This Week in Heresy, Episode 9, Asexuality and Paganism and Other Fantastic Things, with our in-studio guest, Sarah Thompson. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hi. Glad to be back.
Hello. So you just wrote an article on Pathos yesterday.
Yes.
About asexuality and paganism. Why don't you talk about a little bit about what you wrote, and we can move on from there.
Cool. What did I write? It's all a blank.
It happens.
I did my usual writing the article right at the very last possible second, just before my editorial deadline, and
right.
It was in the early hours of the morning, so forgive me if I'm a little bit vague on the exact details of what I wrote. But basically, I wrote about asexuality as being the A that's missing from the alphabet soup. Mm-hmm. And I wrote mostly about that and spoke a little bit about its intersection with pagan spirituality, but only a little bit. But then again, remember that my Pathos articles are capped to 1,000 words, and you can only do so much in 1,000 words. So I think we have more time than 1,000 words here.
That's true. So why do you think the A has been missing, and why do you think historically people don't really talk about asexuality?
Well, how many people do you know that even knows what asexuality is?
That's true.
How do people that are asexuals themselves even know that they're asexual? That's
true. I mean, even for myself, I didn't realize what bisexuality is until I read the book By Any Other Name,
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my God, there's a word for that.
Well, as somebody pointed out on my Facebook today, oddly enough, a friend from the UK, he made the comment that the first time he ever saw the word asexuality was in a novel by Greg Egan, science fiction, hard sci-fi novel called Distress, from, I think, dating back to about 2001. And that's probably the first time I ever saw the word too. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was kind of interesting at the time, but didn't really join the dots and connect it to myself at the time. Mm-hmm. And that took a good few years.
Is it an actual, like homosexuality is a clinical term now? No,
there is a pathologized term for it, which escapes the mind right now. But basically, it is a supposedly very rare disorder, and it's regarded as a disorder because people who feel very bad about the fact that they aren't sexually attracted to anybody will go to a shrink and get head shrunk and try and get fixed. Of course, this is near impossible because it's an orientation, unfortunately.
Right. So it's basically at the point where homosexuality used to be.
Pretty much. Where people will try with, honestly, the best will in the world and with the best of intentions to cure you. Mm-hmm. But you can't cure somebody's eye color. You can't cure somebody's gender orientation. You can't cure somebody's sexual preference. It isn't something to cure, it's just an aspect of them. And frankly, asexuality is right there with those.
Yeah.
And let's not waste a whole bunch of time with all the years and years of stupid brain-dead theories from the psych profession, from people who don't experience it themselves and decide they'd rather theorize than actually listen to their patients. Let's not go through 20 years of that like we did with the trans thing, or more than 20 years, 40 years, and probably hundreds of years of with the lesbian and gay thing. Let's just not do that.
Yeah. Well, from your lips to deity's ears, basically.
Yeah.
So it's always boggled my mind that people really don't accept what people tell them as far as how they define themselves in any way, really.
No.
It's like you say you're asexual and people are like, oh, well, something must be wrong with you. Or you're transgender. Well, that must be some sort of disorder. And it's just like, no, this is just who people are.
So basically, responses that I've had to me, the people finding out that I identify as asexual, have been anything from, I suppose, the sort of well-meaning, oh, how very sad for you, to the other end of the extreme where, well, you just haven't found the right person to make you, to fix you, which is the same argument made by lots of misogynist men against lesbians that just haven't found the right bloke with a big enough, whatever.
Yeah. ...
fill in the blanks family show.
Yeah.
There's always carrots.
Right. Exactly. See, the thing is, people don't need fixing. And it's not other people's place to fix people.
No. If I go to somebody and ask to be fixed, then that's something quite different to the situation where somebody wants to fix me just because they think that I'm disordered.
Right.
I avoid the psychiatric profession like the veritable plague for this reason, because there is enough about me that might have somebody that was not so well informed decide that I'm some value of crazy.
Right.
I'm not. I'm really not.
Absolutely not. I should know.
Yeah, just ask both my teapot and my hat stand. They're quite sure about this. But, there's always a tendency for people to want to fix you.
Right.
It can get ugly, and I don't really want to expose myself to that or expose anybody close to me to having to watch me go through that. I'm not interested, not going there.
But you don't need it.
No.
I mean, this issue is just like I said, it's just a part of who you are.
So what we've not really talked much about is what actually the word means.
What does it mean?
So it's one of those things where I can speak for myself. I can't necessarily speak for others. And from my admittedly fairly limited understanding, because there are not that many people that identify as asexual, and you don't really find a lot of people. But from the little interaction that I've had, it does appear that there is a spectrum, as there is within just about every other identity. And some people are asexual and what people denote aromantic. So if somebody is aromantic, then they have no real interest in a relationship with anybody. They might have friendships, but no big R relationships. And so that sort of precludes doing the sex thing. Right. And the asexual, their asexuality may actually be orthogonal to or will fall out of being aromantic. Right. In my case, I'm not aromantic. Right. I'm actually quite romantic.
Yeah, you are.
But I am asexual. So I've known about this about myself for a very long time, but I haven't had the words for it. So it might be helpful to try and explain it how I used to try and explain it before the words started to become mainstream. Sure. So years ago, I would basically describe myself as, it's a bit like if you imagine a continuum where between, you see somebody the other side of the street who's really hot. Right. And it goes through your head, well, I'd really like to talk to that person. They're really hot. They've got to be totally amazing. The hotness might be, physical hotness might be the fact that they've just demonstrated this awesome thing that they've made at a maker fair or something like that. There are many kinds of hotness. So, you latch onto that and you think this person's awesome and you want to talk to them. So that's stage one. Right. I check that box. Stage two is you might want to get to know them and befriend them. Right. Stage three is you might become really close friends. Stage four is you may fall in love with them. Right. I'm still checking all the boxes so far. Right. Stage five is you might want to go to bed with them and do the thing. Right. The thing and the other thing, as I said in my post. Yeah. It's that bit of wiring that I don't have. It's not that the plumbing doesn't work if I actually push it hard enough and end up there. Right. It's the fact that it isn't connected. There's no mental link between the two. And also, because of a lot of the messed upness of my background through being trans and the unresolved issues there, the act of pushing myself to bridge that gap is actually quite traumatic. Right. And it's traumatic not because I'm asexual, I think. I think it's traumatic because I'm trans.
Yeah.
To be brutally honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
But still, that connection just absent.
Right. And it doesn't mean you don't want physical touch either.
Oh, of course not.
I mean, because, you know, we hug and we kiss and, you know, we do all that romantic schmoopy stuff.
Yeah, we hold hands in the cinema and you hide behind me in the scary bits. You know,
we'd be awfully cute. And, yes, and people barf.
yeah.
But, you know, it doesn't mean you don't want intimacy.
No, I need intimacy as much as anyone, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what it is, at least around the intimacy aspect of it, is that people conflate intimacy with sex.
Yes, they do. Also, bear in mind that for a lot of people, this continuum that I've described, they have wiring that actually short circuits it.
Mm-hmm.
They will see somebody and may just want to instantly have sex with them without even knowing them, without even talking to them.
Right.
That is so far from my wiring that I can't even wrap my head around it, though it's true for a lot of people.
Right. I mean, I know for myself in my thinking of my own sexual desires and stuff like that, I know for me, I can separate the act of sex from the big our relationship stuff. Yes. And that's not true for everybody either. Because, you know, I know a lot of people who are very old-fashioned in that way, at least. Well, I guess that's not very nice to say old-fashioned, but, you know, they are monogamous. They want one partner. You know, they don't really do sex outside of marriage or sex outside of a relationship, you know, but...
Or if they do and they end up, you know, as many people do in that situation without having really planned it, because one thing led to another, they end up feeling horribly, horribly guilty about it. Right.
And for me, I'm much differently minded that way, you know, like, because, you know, sex is one thing, relationship is a different thing. And how I view relationships is very different, because in some ways I view relationships the same way you are thinking about it, because, you know, a big R relationship doesn't necessarily have to have sex in it to be a committed, full-time, very positive, intimate relationship.
So, another odd thing about me is and it's probably totally consequent to this asexuality weird view of, and its consequential weird view of the world that I have. I've never had a really huge delineation between different kinds of relationship. So, you know, most people have the idea that you have the big R relationship, probably in fact more than just the R, like the whole word in capital letters and probably underlined a couple of times just to be sure.
Yeah.
And no other relationship's allowed to be even close to that, because if it even gets close, then people get all out of shape and it's kind of weird.
Right.
I don't really get that. It's not really how my brain works.
Right.
So I have a tendency to form very close relationships that are somewhere, to borrow a Doctor Whoism, the wibbly wobbly relationship kind of thing.
Right.
That is sort of like, well, you know, to some people, wow, you people are married, and no, this is just like a coworker. In other cases, you know, I've had relationships where we're quite independent of each other. And it's all the same thing. It's just a matter of degree to me.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if it feels healthy.
Yeah.
People have told me it isn't, but I think it seems healthy to me. It doesn't seem to cause me a problem. But then again, because I don't understand the sex thing, it's hard for me to get hooked. It's hard for me to get all messed up about it.
Right. And, you know, and I've come to, and I've gone through my own phases of getting messed up about things, but coming to the conclusions that we were just talking about. And it was like a revelation when I figured that out, because it's like, oh, well, I can really love somebody and not want to have sex with them. So
can you tell your story? Because I want to turn the tables on you here and say, you know, you had a bit of an epiphany about this. And it was quite an interesting epiphany, because it didn't come from me. It came from an entirely different direction. And I think it might be nice for you to talk about it.
Well, it was interesting because so when I moved out to California, I was convinced I was a top.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. And people can ask me about what that is later. And I was,
if you don't know, you're too young.
Yeah. And I was, and I was convinced that, I wanted monogamy in the sense that of the whole romantic-y person in shining armor kind of thing. And it was person because I'm bisexual, pansexual, something like that. Anyway, when I came out to California, I kind of went through a second iteration of my 20s because, I came out here and I felt freer. And that's a whole nother story in itself. And people can ask me about that later too. But it was really interesting because I got into the polyamorous community, and polyamory in general is having more than one relationship. And there's a lot here where there's more of like a married couple that has an open relationship, and it gets complicated and you need roadmaps and stuff. But moving on.
Spreadsheets and
databases. Yeah.
And Google
charts.
Calendar. Do you ever need Google Calendar?
I have Google Calendar. Anyway, I went to this workshop given by some people that me know. And it was a poly triad, and they were talking about their network of people. And that's when I first heard about the idea that the people in your network that you have relationship with don't necessarily have to mean that they are the people that you have sex with.
Yes.
And it was just like, oh, so because I had a friend of mine at the time, and he's one of my best friends, and he can out himself if he wants, if he hears this, that I was really in love with, and I mean really in love with,
yes.
Like capital L. And I was conflating that with the sexual part of that, but he was 100% gay.
Right.
Like, did not want to look at women's parts ever. Kind of gay. Okay. And hearing that, oh, the relationship doesn't have to have sex. Sex does not have to be in the equation to have a loving, committed relationship.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, so I can be that intimate with people and not get bent out of shape about it because we're not having sex.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, okay.
And, once you arrive at that point in your head, it's like, duh.
Why didn't I think of that before?
Yeah, no, yeah, there isn't a chapter on this in the manual. Like, why isn't this in the manual?
But the other thing too that it made me realize is that some of the relationships that I have had, I've had people like, oh, I'll be your wife and I'll do this for you and that for you. And it's like, but I'm not, I don't need that from you because I'm not at that degree of relationship with you.
Yeah. I believe the term is you're not quite codependent enough for that one.
No kidding.
Lack of codependency. Good.
Yeah.
Remember that, kids.
Yes. So do you think asexuality is becoming more visible, and that the asexual community is starting to grow?
There's a film about it on Netflix for streaming download right now, and it is truly an awesome piece of work. Mm-hmm. And I believe the title is Asexual.
Yeah,
literally Asexual. That is the title.
It's a fantastic film.
Go watch it. It's if you're at all wondering what the whole thing is about, go watch it. And if you look below this link, we will endeavor to include an IMDb link for it if you want to go and track it down.
Absolutely.
But yeah, actually for me, it wasn't so much the Greg Egan novel, which I think put the word in my head. It was actually watching that doco, which is probably less than 2 years ago for me now.
Right.
And seeing that doco, and it's like, huh. Seriously? Huh.
Oh.
Hang on. That's me.
Yeah. And I know watching it with you was one of the things that really helped me understand it.
I was scared as hell showing you that.
Oh, I know. I remember. But it was really good because it's like, oh, okay. I get this. Because, it is difficult. It was difficult, because, when we first got together in the first couple of years, I had to do a lot of work on myself to realize, no, this is just who you are. So what part of my brain is getting bent out of shape, and why is it getting bent out of shape? Yeah. And what am I not understanding right now?
Yes.
And I had to do a lot of work myself, and it was really interesting. And I've told this story to you a lot because I like the story. I like the novel. But there's this book by an author named M.C.A. Hogarth, and I'll have the link. But it's called Black Blossom, and it's about an alien culture that has that kind of mindset about relationship. Like, procreation is very separate from relationship and marriage and all that stuff.
Yes.
And there's a concept called a touch lover in there that just kind of broke things open. Because it's like, oh, it's all the intimacy, but no sex. But it's just as committed, just as intimate, just as passionate.
And it's not celibate.
Right.
This is the thing where people cannot wrap their head around it. I am not celibate, damn it.
No.
I am really not celibate.
Right.
I've been to the kind of parties which would prove without any question that I am not celibate.
Right. Absolutely.
But, and yet.
Yeah.
I am not aromantic.
Mm-hmm.
But I am asexual.
So why do you think it's a problem in the pagan community that asexuality has been excluded?
I don't think it's even been excluded. I think it's so far under the radar, it's not even been discussed. Mm-hmm. I made my post on Patheos today, which is it the world's biggest religion discussion site? I don't know.
Yeah.
It must be close to. I think it actually is. I have a column on there on the Pagan channel called Queer of Swords, if you wish to go check it out.
We'll have a link to it.
Yep. We had another link. There's... Come listen to come listen to the podcast. This homework. Right. It's almost like going to seminary.
Right.
Okay. Well, where was I? Yes. I've completely forgotten what I was talking about.
Pagan community.
Pagan community. Yes. So I made my post. I didn't say an awful lot about the pagan link to it. But one thing which is kind of tangential to that, like most people that post stuff online, particularly if they're in any kind of prominent venue, you get a bit obsessed with your stats.
Right.
I'm as much of a mug for checking stats as the next person.
Yeah, you should see me with this site.
Yeah. So I was checking the stats. I thought, I wonder how many hits there are on the tag asexuality on Patheos. My post was the only one.
Wow.
And Patheos is an enormous site.
Yeah.
With probably hundreds of bloggers across the entire spectrum of religion, from extreme fundy Christian to tree huggers to atheists to you name it, it's on there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mine was the only post tagged with asexual, the only one.
Wow, that's epic.
And I don't think I need to say any more. That's sort of, it's self-evident that religion has not really coped with this, because there'd be at least one post if they had.
Yeah. And it's,
it's not just paganism, that's the whole lot. Christianity too.
Absolutely. Although I think what we mentioned earlier, conflating asexuality with celibacy. Yeah. And I think in Christianity, at least from my thinking about it right just now, that a lot of the celibacy aspect would be conflated with asexuality. And I think some people they immediately go, oh, well, are you doing it for religious reasons? Or, do you want to be a monk or a nun or something like that?
The first thing is, I'm not doing it. I just am.
Right. Exactly.
So here's an interesting theological conundrum for you.
Oh,
I know you like this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You went to school for it and everything.
Uh-huh.
Right. Okay. So let's look at the concept of being a nun from more of a pagan point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole idea of being a nun and distancing yourself from opposite gender relationships and from close same gender relationships that might be sexual.
Uh-huh.
To my sort of primitive pagan eyes, that's a sacrifice.
Absolutely.
So you're making a sacrifice to your God and you're expecting something in return.
Right.
Which is closeness with God.
Yeah, yeah.
And okay, Christians probably wouldn't use the word sacrifice, but
it is.
It doesn't matter what word you use, that there is that exchange.
Right.
If I became a monastic of whatever kind,
right,
I wouldn't be making any kind of sacrifice whatsoever.
I see.
Because what would I be giving up?
That's true.
I would still be able to have very close relationships with other people the way I do.
Which does happen in a monastery.
Yes. And they wouldn't be sexual because I'm not sexual. I'm asexual.
Right.
But I would not be giving up anything to be celibate. You know, celibacy is sort of like an emergent property of asexuality.
Right.
But if you look at the traditionally religiously driven concept of celibacy, and I have to admit that I've been called on to minister to someone in the past that was really struggling with that themselves.
Right.
There's no struggle for me. Right. So can somebody who's asexual be a nun? Can somebody who's asexual be a monk in the same sense that somebody who has to make a sacrifice to be a nun or a monk is?
Right.
I turn that around to you.
Well, it depends on what they're going into religious life for. You know, is it because they need to make that vow? Like because of something? Or are they going into religious life as a minister? Because they're not always synonymous with each other, but they can be. You know, are they going into religious life to hide from the world? Which, well, any nun will tell you is not a good idea.
It's also not very effective from the orders that I've seen myself, unless you go to a cloistered order, of course.
Right. You know, are you taking that vow, and why would you be taking that vow? You know, is it because you have to control an urge, or is it because it's just something that comes with the territory?
Okay, let's be kind of brutal.
Okay.
The Catholic Church has had a serious problem with pedophilia.
Absolutely.
One can only assume that the percentage of Catholic priests who are pedophiles is substantially greater than the percentage of people who are pedophiles in the general population.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that?
Good question.
And in some cases, it's probably the case that they have been attracted to that position so that they can be in a position of power where they can practice what they evilly practice.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cases, they probably genuinely went that route to try and cure themselves, to get closer to God and have God cure them.
Right.
But it didn't work. So unfortunately, I think that's an orientation too. It's just one that we can't accept.
Yeah. It's not that I don't agree with you, and it's really kind of a conundrum. But it also, depends on what you're going in for too.
Yes.
Because you could be asexual and have all that issue too.
Yes, absolutely. It could be a power thing.
Yeah.
You could just be messed up because you're asexual.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because people are told that if they don't have a sexual urge, then there must be obviously something wrong with them.
Though I will say it's unlikely for somebody without a sexual urge to actually sexually abuse somebody.
Yeah.
Like fundamentally, spectacularly unlikely.
Yeah.
They're sort of the opposite of likely to do something like that.
Yeah. So I guess when you think about it, you can't ignore orientation. So whether you're asexual or not, or bisexual or queer or some flavor of queer, even if you're going into religious life, it's something you can't ignore. So you have to deal with it somehow in your life.
Yeah. Yes. I can't speak for somebody that would choose to be a monastic because I've never chosen to be a monastic.
Yeah.
I can see, I've visited places and felt the pull.
Yeah.
I've had it offered to me.
I know, I remember.
I almost ended up staying at a convent in Germany because it was offered.
We'll have to go visit someday. They sound pretty cool.
I hope that nun's still there.
Yeah.
She's awesome. I don't think they realize what they'd be getting if they took me on, man.
It'd be pretty awesome, though.
Yeah.
They have a rocket scientist for a sister. There you go. Yeah. Well, going back to the paganism thing, most of paganism is fertility driven as far as ritual goes. And you mentioned in your article that, which I agree with, is that they've been put into there about sex, and a lot of it coming from the queer community, I think. And I think you're right about that.
Okay, just to, I don't think you made that quite clear, so I'll just re-explain that a little bit. So for the benefit of the non-pagans out there, a lot of pagan paths are sort of, you might call them fertility cults in some sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hesitate to use the word cult.
Yeah.
And they're really sort of central around the idea of celebrating the wheel of the year and the harvest and in the springtime, the birds and the bees.
God and goddess getting together and getting it on.
Every possible sense of the word, yes.
Uh-huh. Beltane.
Which is great if you're white middle class straight and from the home counties in England in the early 20th century, which is actually where a lot of this came from.
Uh-huh.
So what if you're not? What if you're actually queer? So how do you then deal with the idea that you're in this very fertility based thing, but you can't really do fertility?
Right.
I mean, some people rationalize it by saying, well, fertility for me is creation. So my fertility is I create art, or I make furniture, or I fix people's cars. It's all creative, right?
Yeah. And we generally use that.
Yeah.
For that time.
I think that's one of the lesser damaging mental flips that you can do to deal with it. Yeah. Another one which is commonly used, which I think can be rather more damaging, is to flip fertility to mean sex.
Yes.
And if you use sex in place of fertility, then the genderedness goes away. And basically anyone who can be sexual with somebody else can do the magic-y thing with them using the sort of traditional Wiccan approach.
Right.
I'm talking mostly about Wicca here. There are some other non-Wiccan paths that do similar things, and others which are completely different. So I'm mostly talking. As I said in my article, I'm looking at you, Wicca.
Right. Which was, even in our own path, because, I remember it was a struggle for you to wrap your head around Beltane, and we had to really work at it to get it to a place where we could work with it. So explain what Beltane is for the benefit of people who don't know. Well, Beltane is the second of the spring. It's the kind of the spring summer festivals. And generally it's basically when the god and goddess, at least in Wiccan lore, when the god and goddess get it on and the goddess gets impregnated. So like Ostara is when they get it together and get all cute and cuddly, and then Beltane is the act itself. And then Litha, which is summer solstice, is when she's fully pregnant. Right. So, and then Litha is when the new god comes. So,
which if you're if you're gay or lesbian or heaven forfend, single.
Hi. Right.
You're just single.
Right.
The whole thing doesn't really work.
Right.
So if you conflate the fertility with sex, then you've got a wider option for people that you might work rights with. But at the end of the day, if you're asexual, that whole thing comes crashing down. It ain't going to work
absolutely.
at all. So you've got to start from scratch and figure something else out. And I struggled with Beltane.
Yeah, I remember.
And I still do, to be honest. I still haven't fully got the answer. I have an answer, maybe. I'm not even sure I can put it into words, but
yeah,
I think I've sort of come to understand it fairly well and cope with it through understanding it fairly well, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And, it is a tricky holiday because, when I started thinking about it with you, it's like, okay, well, what if I had other asexuals in here? Or what if I had people for whose sex is a trauma?
Yeah.
Because of abuse or something, or rape. How do you deal with that?
Like 30% of the population?
Right. But, you have to think, I personally think that as clergy, I have to think of these things because, I have to take care of people. And I don't know who's going to come to my doorstep wanting spiritual direction and spiritual care. And, how do I make it so that they are safe and they feel safe when in a circle at Beltane?
So the other flip side of this, as Gina will probably explain to you, I'm a bit of a troll, and I have a horrible habit of arguing opposite positions every other time I speak. So I've had some flack back at me from my Pathos posts where I advocate accommodating people in circles by changing practice and redacting practice and doing whatever it takes, really.
Right.
And people have come back to me and said, but you're going to kind of suck all the guts out of it. I mean, is there anything real left if you suck it all out just in case you might offend somebody? No, you've got to take that seriously. You can't just roll your eyes at it.
Yeah, but I always think that, religion needs to evolve. It has to be, it's not static. As much as people would like it to be static. It doesn't matter which religion it is. Every time it's going to evolve because there's humans involved. Things will change, things will be different. Like the Christianity of today is completely different from the Christianity in 180,
And, all right, let's be real about this. If the thing that you're most concerned about in terms of the validity of a circle as being whether people work skyclad or not.
Right.
Show up sometime and, we'll call up a demon or two.
Yeah. And
by the time the curtains are on fire and the cats are inside out and there's green ooze coming down the walls.
Right.
People aren't really going to be thinking terribly much about whether they're wearing clothes or not.
Right. Well, the other thing too.
What matters is the work, the capital W work.
Yes.
What the OTO folks call the great work.
Right. Absolutely. At least I think so too. And we can sit there in jeans and t-shirts and call whatever up. And I've done oracle work in not much more than I'm wearing right now, which is a jean skirt and tank top.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty darn powerful.
The cowboy hat and the spurs is pretty cool, but
I don't have a cowboy hat.
This is the advantage of radio, you see. I can mix stuff up and you can't really catch me on it.
But see, I remember when I was first in my first Wiccan coven and when I was first in Wicca, there was a lot, and this may also be an East Coast thing because East Coast is a little more conservative in their Wicca than West Coast. But, there was like, you do not wear watches in circles. You do not use iPads.
Thou shalt not use any technology any more complicated than a candle.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, you had your book of shadows that you read from, and you had to copy it by hand.
Copied out by hand from
somebody else's book of shadows. And well, And then, there's the whole secrecy thing, but that's a whole nother show, and we will do that later.
So to anybody who spent days and days and days and days writing down or copying out their own Book of Shadows, just try Googling a few bits of it. It'll save you loads of time.
Yeah.
And, what does secrecy mean? We can just Google it and it's all there anyway.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother show in and of itself, which we should do soon.
We probably will.
Yeah. But, I find, we've used iPads in circles. We've used iPods and phones and, to play music.
And I have made magical tools out of plastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plastic, I tell you, plastic.
Yeah.
I should be burned at a plastic stake for that one.
Yeah. But, it's kind of like when people get...
Delarin, though, I want the good stuff.
Well, it's also the same thing, when in some Christian practices, people get all bent out of shape if it's not wine and bread. Yeah. If it's something other than wine and bread.
Let's talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah.
So, we're going back to the Great Rite here, for the benefit of the non-Wiccans, the Great Rite is this symbolic or not so symbolic getting it on with somebody else.
Yeah, depends on what group you're in.
Yeah. So basically, it's either symbolic and there's like a cup and a dagger and there's, work it out for yourself, kid. Or there's a different kind of cup and a different kind of dagger, and you may have the curtains drawn for that one.
Right.
And you can work that one out for yourself, kids, too. So that whole symbolism of the Great Rite thing, going to, that it sort of expands out into the Wiccan practice of cakes and ale, which is basically analogous to the Christian Eucharist.
Yeah.
I say analogous to, not the same as. Don't burn me for the stake for that one.
No.
So different symbolism, similar practice. So you've basically got the idea of you pass cakes around and you pass wine around. Some traditions call it cakes and ale. Some people call it cakes and wine.
Yeah.
And some people get super bent out of shape if you use something other than wine. And super bent out of shape if you use something other than cakes. I was thinking, man, it's a damn what you use.
Yeah, because you're blessing it. And as soon as you bless it, no matter what type of clergy you are, as soon as you're blessing something, it's sacred.
Yes.
Whether it's food, an object, what?
When you bless something, you make it sacred. You sanctify it. That's what the word means.
Well, it's like when I was talking to Athena last week, when people get weirded out by talismans, well, like, what is the cross around your neck? What is your Star of David?
It's a talisman.
It's a talisman. You're asking
very
deity
powerful one.
Yeah, you're asking deity for protection through this symbol. Like the crescent and star. Same thing.
Yes. Of course.
The words of the Quran, right?
People that work with demons and other forms of ceremonial magic have a wider selection of symbolism that they use for these purposes.
Exactly. So I guess what it comes down to is, people seem to get bent out of shape about difference. And, if it doesn't match what this is kind of like my rant the other day and my Heretic Speaks #4, people have this narrow view of what Wicca should be, what this, that, the other, or what sexuality is, or how people should be. And if you're not that, then you're not true or right, proper, whatever.
Well, I'm a Geordie. I'm from Northeast England, and my response to that is, let's go outside and you can say that again.
Amen.
Yeah. It's not for you to tell me what I am and aren't.
Yeah. And this is a problem, especially on the internet, I think. And this is
the
above
religion.
religion.
Of the internet. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is above religion too. It's like, who are you to tell somebody what their sexuality is? Who are you to tell somebody if they are worthy enough to be a witch because of said sexuality? Blah, blah, blah.
I think, a lot of people, when they get into this stuff, there's a sort of newly converted zeal. And things like initiations and grades and things get very, very important to people, and they get awfully obsessed about it.
Right.
But after a while, these things don't seem to be very important after all.
Yeah.
And the ego thing, for some, if you're lucky, it doesn't become an issue, and You know, it just becomes a thing you do on Friday nights, and it's a substantial part of your identity, but it's not. You know, you're not doing it for a living.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's well, for some people, you know, they're really wrapped up in the Wiccan identity. You know, just as people can get wrapped up in a gay identity or a lesbian identity, and so like the sexual aspect of what people think Beltane is, that they you know,
becomes a big part of their own identity. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you be doing that on Beltane, you know?
Well, you know, but if it works for you and it works for the people you're doing it with, get down with your bad self.
Yeah.
I'm not judging.
Yeah. I think you're right.
It's just don't give me crap for not doing it.
Right.
That's all I ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It isn't easy for me to understand the system, you know.
Right.
I can't really pick apart the motivations that underlie the people that do the traditional Beltane thing, because I don't have the wiring. Mm-hmm. To borrow a Heinlein word, I can't grok it.
Right.
Fundamentally can't.
Right.
I think I also perceive, this is an interesting direction to go in. I also perceive jealousy differently.
Right.
I have felt jealousy in the past, or at least something like it, but it was more fear of losing somebody than anything else.
Yeah.
I've never really felt jealous that someone has got something sexually that I haven't.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't recall it anyway.
Too. Well, that makes sense for me too, because, you know, I've done my work in my head. So now when I get jealous of something, like if I'm jealous of somebody interacting with you, it's usually more because I feel like I haven't had enough time with you.
Yeah.
And it's not really like that you're with them.
Yeah.
In that sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
What is the future for an asexual movement or recognition, do you think?
Yeah, we could all have massive asexual sex parties and stare at each other's toes. I think that's definitely where it's going. No question about it.
I love you.
So what do you want me to say? I mean, I don't know where it's going to go. We're not understood enough. We don't understand ourselves enough yet.
Yeah.
We're not. It's hard to call it a movement because, you know, it requires enough people to move. So, you know, patience. Give us time. We'll get there. The scholarship's not been done yet.
Yeah.
The activism's not been done yet.
Yeah.
It's where the gay community was maybe in the 50s. Yeah,
I think you're right.
But one useful thing is we're not quite in the same situation. We're not actually terribly discriminated against. We're just misunderstood.
Yeah.
And we're given a lot of crap by people around us because they don't get it.
Right.
And I think we also end up in relationships we probably shouldn't because we don't necessarily get it.
Right.
And it's not necessarily fair for the people we're with.
Yeah.
And I've always felt bad about that for you, actually, because it wasn't the deal when we got together, because that's not how I identified when we got together.
Yeah, but I also have this thing wired in me that, you know, coming into relationship with you, I accepted you as you are. Because I tend to accept people as they are, unless something happens otherwise to make me have a different opinion.
How very unusually enlightened of you.
Oh my goodness, right? Well, I mean, it just, honestly, it's easier that way. It saves a lot of trouble.
Yeah, to be honest, what you just said, I think, is what most people on the planet say to themselves that they do, except you actually do.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily an easy thing either, because there's a lot of pre-programming in my head that I have to work through to do it.
Like only every piece of Hollywood literature, Hollywood movie, every bit of literary fiction just about ever written,
like Cinder frickin' Rella,
doesn't deal with the idea of being asexual.
No.
I mean, there's that Greg Egan novel, and that's about the only thing I can think of. The MCA Hogarth thing.
Yeah, she does actually. She's done several asexual romances, actually. Which, if you haven't read her, you should.
You should get her on the show.
I will. I will talk. I'll see if I can.
Yeah.
So.
And I'll do my fangirl squee.
Yeah, me too. So, well, we are running out of time, and we'll have links to everything that we talked about in the show notes, and your bio is in the regulars page because you will be a regular. Kind of have no choice. You live with me.
I can't. There's nowhere to run to.
So
I can't run. I can't hide.
And this, folks, is why I married her.
Yeah, and she gets to steal my decent microphones to make this program too.
Yeah. Well, you have the good video camera to do your stuff. So
that's true. That's true.
It's only fair. Well, thank you for being on.
All right. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to thank Sarah for joining us this week. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. There you can also subscribe to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, join our forums, or follow us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.